Hello, I'm Dr. Ramsey, and today we will be discussing the Scopes trial, which took place at the same time as the fundamentalist um, modern controversy at the beginning of the 20th century. You see, there was an express division in the Presbyterian schism, so going through its third stage, that yielded a sort of extreme division on the grounds of science between the fundamentalist movement, which thought that the word of God was literal and therefore evolution was literal, etc. And then the modern Christian approach, which believed that there wasn't actually a distinction, more in the Galilean tradition, where what you find out about the natural world would, of course, give you more of an understanding about God and therefore not contradict anything in that regard. And the Scopes trial was sort of a reflection of that shift that was happening both politically and theologically in the US at the time. So John Scopes was a high school teacher in Tennessee who violated the Butler Act, which made it impossible or illegal to teach evolution. Now, at the time, he wasn't actually aware he was directly teaching evolution, but when he was brought up on charges, it was felt from certain circles that it was of political interest to do so. It brought a lot of publicity to Dayton, Tennessee, and it became a very high-profile case, so that in July 1925, when he found himself in the courts of Tennessee, he was facing William Jennings Bryan, who was the former Secretary of State and the prosecuting attorney. And but with the backing of the ACLU, he ended up with Clarence Darrow, who was a renowned defense attorney at the time. And it was seen by the ACLU and by Darrow initially to be an issue of freedom of education and so on. But Darrow shifted gears in terms of his strategy as the course progressed over the week. Now, keep in mind, again, that at this point, it became a media circus. You had media from actually all over the world covering this case in this small town in Tennessee. And again, this is right after World War I, a precursor to World War II, where we see the what we call the second stage of the Industrial Revolution playing out, such that the implementation of mechanization and industrial advancement because of technology, and therefore, your ensuing advancements in science, and the way that shifted everyday life. We see that becoming sort of a threat and a restructuring of society. People are leaving agricultural communities; they're moving into industrial sectors at even greater numbers, and as we see that sociological and societal shift, of course, it starts to begin to change people's views and ideas and values. And the response to that in more agricultural areas and more agricultural regions, particularly in the southern United States, where we have a larger fundamentalist movement, was this sort of feeling of being threatened. And again, from the theological standpoint, you have two opposing views. One that feels that science will fit nicely, dovetail with biblical theory, and that not all biblical stories are factually true. They might be symbolic and so on, versus the fundamentalists, which is the word of God is exactly correct. So we see that, but it's also a political shift, right? Just like at the time of the Civil War, between the ideologies and culture and values of agricultural sectors at that time. At the Civil War, it had been the South, but there were still vast tracts and regions in the larger continental US by the 1920s that were still agricultural, versus the growing urban sectors. So there's a lot at play here. Now, excuse me, ultimately, Scopes will be found guilty. He'll be fined, but it will, of course, be appealed and later overturned. But what's very important is the fact that this young high school teacher in the small town in Tennessee gains global attention because it was a symbolic battle, if you will, about the schisms that are happening in Protestantism in America, particularly the Presbyterian movement, and the larger questions of industrialization and the growth of science.